Recently I've had some questions about my Ohio to Erie Trail ride that I did last year, and I just thought I'd put out a video going over some of my training, the preparations that I did, what I brought with me, what worked for me, and just in general give my overall experience on the trail. It was a 326-mile ride. I did it from Cleveland to Cincinnati. It took me a total of 8 days. 7 of those days I was riding, and one day I was holed up in a hotel waiting out a storm. And also gives me a chance to show off this really cool shirt that I got after I did the Ohio to Erie Trail. And this was my first bike packing or bike touring experience, my first and so far the only one that I've done. I hope to do more, but this is basically a video from one beginner to another beginner. So hope you enjoy the video. I've got some notes that I'm going to go through, and they're not in any particular order, but yeah, let's get started. So the first thing that I was worried about was, riding day in and day out for an entire week. I've never done that before. All of my rides pretty much have been, I go out riding for the day, and then I, come back, get something to eat, and I don't ride again for, 4 or 5 days. So I've got plenty enough time to recover. But with the ride being 326 miles and me wanting to do it in 7 days, I knew I was going to have to up my training. And I think that was going to average out to about 47 miles per day. So my training actually started in March. I was going to do the ride in late June, so I started in March. And for March, April, and May, I did 160 miles a month. And there were a couple of 50-mile rides in there, but I would say the vast majority of the training rides that I did, or just the mileage that I did, was between 20 and 30 miles. And I wasn't always doing that, like ride on a Monday and then on a Tuesday again. I would have like maybe 2 or 3 rides a week. I think there was only a couple of times where I did back-to-back rides, one after the other. And then came June, and June being the beginning of the summer and everything, life got pretty busy for me right in there. And so there was about a 3-week period of time where I didn't ride at all. And I was a little worried that I was going to lose some fitness with that break. But I don't know, maybe it was a good thing and gave my body a little chance to rest and relax. Because once I started to ride, I found out I was in pretty good shape for that particular ride. I was a little sore, and I did get stiff about the 3rd day into the ride, but all in all, the stiffness wasn't too bad. It did last throughout the trip. Maybe if I had done some more training or done some stretching or whatever, I could have gotten away from that stiffness. But overall, it went really well. I think the longest ride was 63 miles, and then the shortest ride was about 20 miles for the whole trip. So all in all, it didn't really take a whole lot of training to do this ride. So I think the Ohio to Erie Trail would be a very good trail for a beginner to tackle, just because 160 miles a month, that's not too bad, I don't think. But food and water, this is something that I really I really overestimated the amount of food that I would need to take with me. I don't know. I thought maybe I was traveling through the Sahara Desert or something instead of Ohio, but I was really concerned, and so I brought 3 energy bars with me that I was going to take. I was going to eat, 3 energy bars a day, and then plus I even had extra snacks, just in case. But as it turns out, that was way overkill, because I brought, all those energy bars with me for the entire trip. And as I said, that was overkill, because there's tons of places that you can stop at to get food, to get snacks, and the same goes for water. Though I'm a little bit more paranoid when it comes to water. I mean, I can ration food if I have to, but I really don't like to ration water. So I carried a 750 milliliter bottle of water with me the entire trip, and it wasn't until the very last day that I used that water bottle, and that was the shortest ride of the whole trip, at about 20 some miles. But I met up with my wife halfway through the ride in Mount Vernon, and by the time I met with her, I had only eaten 3 of those energy bars. So I gave her half of the energy bars that I had remaining, and I took the other half with me. And as it turns out, I didn't even need those. I came home with a lot of energy bars. I think on one ride, I actually ate 2 energy bars. And that was just because the way the food stops worked out that I wanted it. I could have done without, but I ate it anyway. And then water, you stop in any of those restaurants along the way. I mean, you're traveling through Cleveland, Akron, Columbus, Cincinnati, and a couple of smaller towns in between. So you can get water at any of those places. They're really very friendly. They're used to seeing cyclists come through, and especially if you buy a snack or something from them, they have no problem in filling up your water bottle. One person on my Instagram account, which is Keith Outside as well, asked me specifically about hills. And the Ohio to Erie Trail, even though it goes through Ohio, does not really go through a whole lot of hills. I mean, there are certainly some, but they're not terrible. I think Cleveland is right at about 600 feet, and Cincinnati is just below 500 feet. So in general, you're going downhill from Cleveland to Cincinnati, and the highest point of the trail is right there at the halfway point in Centerburg, where it's around 1,200 feet. And what's really good is the Ohio to Erie Trail has a website with tons of information, and if you go look at that site, it has an elevation profile for the entire route, so you can see where the hills are, and you can make your best judgment as to where you want to go. But in general, it's downhill from Cleveland to Cincinnati, and then once you get to Xenia, it's pretty much all downhill. And the toughest hill was on the for me was on the Holmes County Trail. I think it was about a 2-mile hill, and it was kind of steep on the last little bit. And even if you went from Cleveland, or excuse me, went from Cincinnati to Cleveland, I don't think any of the hills would have been too terrible. There was one hill, it was short and steep, that I had to take a break on, and that was mainly, I think, because I couldn't get into my bottom chain ring. I was having some difficulty shifting my gears that day, and so that caused me just a little trouble. But that was, a mechanical issue and not something that you should worry about on the trail as far as the hills go. So either way you go, I don't think hills really need to be any concern for the Ohio to Erie Trail. One thing I should have done better is pay more attention to the weather. When I went into this ride, I figured, I'm just going to be riding, these 7 days, and so whatever the weather throws at me, that's just what I'm going to ride through that day. I did have sun protection with me. The jacket that I wore through the ride does have an SPF rating to it, but I didn't bring any rain gear, and that was a conscious decision because, it's at this point in time, it's June, it's late in June, and so a lot of the spring rains have gone. Squirrels are fighting in the trees. But yeah, a lot of the spring rain is gone, and my experience with wearing rain gear during the summertime is, I sweat a lot, and so, whether I wear the rain gear or not, I'm going to get soaked. So I didn't bring any rain gear with me. I just figured, I'm going to get soaked. But what happened on, this ride, this was the 5th day. I was riding into Xenia, and, I started off in, I think I started off in Columbus that morning. And my wife texted me. She says, hey, there are some serious thunderstorms later in the day, so you should probably ride faster than what you normally do. And my basic response to her was, it's like, I got to ride 50 some miles today. This is the 4th day of riding for me. I can't really go fast. I'll just keep plodding on and I'll get there, and it'll be all right. Well, as it turns out, this was one doozy of a storm that was brewing. And as I'm getting closer and closer to Xenia, my wife is texting me more often saying, you better hurry up, otherwise you're going to get, doused. And for a while, I could see the storm coming. It and I were on kind of parallel paths. So for about 10 miles or so, the storm was just off to my right, and I was fine. But with about a mile left to go to the hotel, the storm finally caught me, and it was a super scary storm. I mean, it was just, it wasn't just a thunderstorm. I mean, it was like right on top of me. I mean, it's like when you see the lightning and hear the thunder all in the same moment. I mean, it's close lightning, and the rain is just coming down in buckets. And even on the video, at the end of the day video, I said, I'm riding through the streets, and at the bottom of my pedal stroke, my feet are underwater because there's just so much rain. And it was really it was really the scariest moment of the whole trip, and so, I think back on that, and had I paid a little bit more attention to the weather, or, more specifically, paid more attention to the wife, I could have gotten, into the hotel before I had to ride through that. I mean, I was a mile short of that. And, and the terrible thing is, because I was a mile out, and, I've never been to Xenia, so I've got no idea where my hotel is at. So I've got my cell phone stuck in a Ziploc bag so it doesn't get wet, and I'm following GPS on the phone, kind of holding it with one hand and half of a hand on the handlebars and the other hand fully on the handlebars, and looking at this thing and trying to get to my hotel. And then to top it all off, my hotel, for whatever reason, wasn't marked, like, big. It was a Ramada in Xenia. It didn't have the big Ramada on it. It just had, the awning and no sign in front of it. And so I rolled up there, not knowing if that was my hotel or not, but bound and determined that I wasn't going to leave if it wasn't. But fortunately, it was. So definitely pay more attention to the weather. The heat in the end of June for Ohio typically isn't terrible, but certainly if you were to leave, do the ride in, July or August, you'd need to pay some attention to the heat. For the most part, navigating on the trail is pretty easy. Starting off in Cleveland and even in Cincinnati, you're following signs that it's a green oval with a number 1, a white number 1 in the middle, and that's the designated route for the Ohio to Erie Trail. And you're just following those signs for most of the trail, and they're laid out pretty good. You get into some of the rural areas where you're riding on the road, and it seems like sometimes they don't have them as often as you would like, but they are there, and they do have arrows saying turn here, turn there, and so it is pretty well marked from Cleveland to Columbus, and then from Cincinnati to Columbus. Once you get into Westerville and the Columbus area, they changed their sign convention. I mean, you're looking for signs on, like street signs on posts that tell you where the Ohio to Erie Trail goes. And then on some parts of Columbus, you're actually looking at the trail itself. They've got the Ohio to Erie Trail stenciled in there. And I think it was on the Alum Creek Trail that they didn't necessarily have any Ohio to Erie Trail signs. And I'm going from memory on this, but you had to know that you were following the Alum Creek Trail for the Ohio to Erie Trail, because the Ohio to Erie Trail is a network of trails connected together to form that route. And so when you're in the Columbus, Westerville area, you do have to pay more attention to where you're going. And again, if you get on the Ohio to Erie Trail website, and I'll post a link to that down in the bottom in the description, but if you go to their website, they do have very detailed directions as to where to go and where the turns are. And then if you have a Garmin or some other such device, you can actually download the file into your Garmin, and that will help you navigate as well. Oh, and also, I almost forgot, I did order the maps that the Ohio to Erie Trail people put out. There's 4 of them all total, and those helped out as well. And then in general, whenever I had doubts, I would always consult the map or whatever. But in general, if you kind of went with your gut as to where you felt you needed to go, you were generally right. So navigation is, aside from the Columbus area, is pretty easy on the Ohio to Erie Trail. Meow. The best city to ride through was definitely Akron. Akron has done an amazing job of making all kinds of really beautiful landscape. There's even one section of the trail that you're riding on a bridge that is going over top of a lake. It was just absolutely beautiful, and I really enjoyed riding through Akron. As to individual trails that I liked best, both the Alum Creek and the Camp Chase trails, which are centered right around Columbus, both of those trails were beautiful as well. Going through a lot of woodlands, a lot of bridges, a lot of river crossings. Just probably the highlight of the entire trail is those two trails going through Columbus. I definitely enjoyed them, would wholeheartedly recommend them, and I'm definitely going to go back there and do a specific video on both of those trails. Just absolutely beautiful. Well, if there was a best part of the trail, then there's got to be the worst part of the trail. And for me, the worst part of the trail was, no question, it was the Prairie Grass Trail going into Xenia. That trail is just long, straight, and kind of exposed. I mean, the only thing that I really remember, well, two things I remember about that trail, is that it basically just followed, power lines the whole way, and I was caught in a headwind virtually the entire time that I was on that trail. Now, to be fair to that trail, that was also the day that started out wet and ended up with the thunderstorm. So, maybe I'm giving that trail a bit of a bad rap, and I should really probably ride that trail again to see if I like it any better. But as far as the overall trip goes, yeah, the Prairie Grass Trail was not fun for me. Maybe type 2 fun, but not fun at the moment. Okay, so the Ohio to Erie Trail is not all rail to trails. There's something like 50 miles of actual road riding that you have to do. And I've never been completely comfortable riding on the road. I've done it, but I've never really liked it. I've always felt kind of nervous being out there. So I definitely made sure I was as visible as possible. I had on my jacket, which is it has yellow sleeves on it, so that helps the visibility. And then I also had a blinking red light mounted on my seat so that traffic could see me. Most of the traffic that you run into, as far as really heavy traffic, where you're out there with cars and big trucks and the like, is in Cincinnati. That's the worst section as far as road traffic goes for the entire ride. And that's only like, I don't know, maybe, I'm guessing here, maybe about 6 miles or so. Other major cities that you go through, Cleveland, for Cleveland, even though you're starting or ending in Cleveland, you're actually skirting around the outskirts of Cleveland. And so there's like virtually no traffic. There's like one road crossing that you have to do, and then after that, you're done with Cleveland. Columbus, I think if you read the Ohio to Erie web page, they say if you go through later in the day, there's no traffic through the downtown area, and I found that to be true, because one of my stops was in Columbus. And when I rolled through Columbus, there was no traffic at all. As far as the other sections, the other vast majority of that 50 miles, you're on rural roads, and they're not very trafficked. But I did find on one section that I was on, even though it wasn't a whole lot of traffic on it, it seemed like they went pretty fast on that little rural road. And everybody, from the people on the rural roads to the people in Cincinnati were very courteous. I mean, they moved over. They gave me plenty of room. I did not have a single issue with any vehicle on the entire ride. So I really believe that traffic in those areas are at least somewhat accustomed to riders coming through. So I didn't have any issues. Didn't like the traffic going through Cincinnati, but all in all, it really wasn't too bad. I didn't really bring a whole lot of stuff with me on this ride. I was staying in hotels, so I didn't bring any camping gear, and all I really brought with me was a very basic repair kit. I had 2 inner tubes, a tire patch kit, a tire boot, to repair damage to the tire itself. I had a bicycle pump and a bicycle tool, and rightly or wrongly, those are the only repair items I brought with me. And I was really fortunate. During that whole ride, I didn't have any flat tires, and there was one underpass that I went through in Columbus where there was just glass scattered everywhere, and I thought, there's no way I'm getting through this without getting a flat tire, and probably getting both tires flat. But fortunately, I made it through the whole ride without any mechanical issues. So I don't know what I would bring in addition to what I did bring, just because I didn't have any failures. I suppose as I have failures, I might rethink that. Also brought just your basic toiletries, and then for extra clothing, I wasn't really planning on doing anything other than riding, so I brought a bathing suit with me, a t-shirt, and a baseball cap, and that was really about all of the the equipment and clothing that I brought with me. Yeah, and it all seemed to work out pretty well. I did have to buy some saddlebags for this trip, or panniers. I think that's how you pronounce that. Still not sure about how to pronounce that word. But I didn't have any prior to this, so I had to go to my local bike shop and buy a set. And this was my first trip, and I wasn't really sure whether I would enjoy this or not. So admittedly, I went kind of on the cheap end for my gear, and all in all, it held up pretty nicely. It's definitely not, the gear that I chose was definitely not weatherproof. It was just basically, a canvas bag. I mean, I'm sure it's made out of something better than canvas, but it was basically just a bag that, had flaps that you strapped down, and, you had to make sure it was strapped down, fairly tight, so that if it did rain, water wouldn't get in, or not too much water would get in, because it definitely had gaps on the side. And when I was talking to the bike shop people, the guy said that, you know, no pannier is completely waterproof. He said they might say they're waterproof, but they're not. If you get caught out in the rain, especially, you know, a heavy rain or an all-day rain, he says things in there will get wet. And so he told me to bring plenty of Ziploc bags, because Ziploc bags are your friend. So I put all my clothes, you know, my electronic gear, I put all that stuff in Ziploc bags, and it worked out for me. During that heavy rain, when I got back to the hotel, you know, I pulled everything out, you know, expecting it to be pretty much soaked. But there was only a little bit of water in the bottom there, and it cleaned out really nicely. And with the Ziploc bags, nothing was wet. So if you get panniers, you know, still make sure you put all your important stuff in those Ziploc bags, because they'll definitely save you in the end. As I said earlier, I stayed in hotels the entire trip. I believe there are places to camp along the trail. Don't know where any of those campsites might be, but I think they are there. But as far as hotels go, there are, you know, you're traveling through a lot of cities, some of them major cities for Ohio, and you know, you've got some other smaller cities that you're going through. So there are hotel locations all throughout the trail, and you know, I didn't have any problems bringing the bike into any of those hotels. Two of the hotels were, you know, maybe a little bit on the classier side, and you know, not that I'm a classy person, it's just that you know, that's where the hotel was, and it was, you know, closest to the trail, and so that's the hotel that I went to. But none of them had any problems at all with me bringing in the bicycle. You know, I thought some of them, you know, might frown at it, or you know, give me a little bit of flack for it, but nobody did. And in fact, when you wheel your bicycle into the hotel, they generally ask, you know, what you're doing, and you know, how long you've been riding the trail, and you know, where you started from that day and how far you rode. And so they're very interested in your comments about the trail, and you know, they want to know how the ride is going for you, and they were all very accommodating. I will say that as you're traveling through London, Ohio, you definitely do not want to miss London, Ohio. This probably should have been part of you know, the best things about the trail, because London, Ohio is really a fantastic place to cruise through on the trail, because you've got restaurants, bars, ice cream shop, you know, all like literally right on the trail. So however you do the ride, you want to make sure that you have the time to spend in London, Ohio. And that was really my only complaint about the hotels that I stayed at during this trip. And it wasn't the hotel; it was just the location of the hotel in relationship to London. Because when I cruised through London, I still had, I want to say, about 7 miles to go. And it was one of those things where it's like, you know, I'd really like to stop at London and, you know, get something to eat and, you know, check the place out. But I've still got 7 miles to go, and it's already been, you know, a day. If I stop here now, those remaining 7 miles are just going to be, you know, brutal. So I made it to the hotel. I got showered up, got an Uber, and went back to London. Had a really good really good time there. But it was kind of hard for me to get an Uber back to the hotel from there. And I don't know if it was just that time of day or if that's a thing, you know, where that particular area is not a very common place for, you know, non-cyclists or, you know, non-Londoners to go to. I don't know. But I did have a hard time getting back. I mean, it was about an hour before an Uber even agreed to pick me up, which wasn't too awful bad. Gave me enough time to get, you know, an ice cream cone. So it wasn't a complete loss. But if you can find something close to London, if you're staying at a hotel there, that would be better than having to ride another 7 miles past that. But yeah, do not miss London, whatever you do. You also meet a lot of friendly people along the trail. Every time I took a break along the trail, especially when I was on the road sections of the trail, there would be another bicycle tourist come through, and they would stop, ask if I was okay, and then you know, we would start chatting. You know, I met one person that was doing the entire trail in 3 days. You know, so that's over 100 miles a day in order to do that, which, you know, hats off to that guy. I met a teacher who started off in St. Louis, Missouri, and was riding all the way up to Maine as part of his summer break. And also met some ladies that when I was turned around, they set me straight. If I had gone the way I wanted to go, I would have made a wrong turn, and, you know, would have had to have made up some serious miles probably in order to get back on track. So I'm glad I ran into them. Just loads of friendly people. It was just an enjoyable experience all the way around. So that wraps up my comments about the Ohio to Erie Trail. The Ohio to Erie Trail is definitely something that a beginning bike tourist can do. I thoroughly enjoyed it. This was my first tour. Definitely won't be the last. I'm already planning my next one out, which will hopefully be next year, and I'll talk more about that when the time comes. But if you're thinking about doing this trail, you know, stop thinking about it. It's a wonderful trail. Go ahead and do it, and you'll be hooked. No doubt about it. Hope you enjoyed the video.